What's up, Space Pirates? This is your Admiral, the effortlessly entertaining Dr. Disaster, and the dominance of indie and AA studios in the gaming industry is carrying on as smaller projects are smashing the bloated budgets of their AAA counterparts right in the face. Less expensive games from smaller studios have been winning big time lately. Of course, the biggest example of this is Claire Obscure Expedition 33. That game is a legitimate Game of the Year contender made by a bunch of former Ubisoft employees who struck out on their own. It was a $50 game and it kicked ass. The first Berserker Kazan came from a smaller AA studio and it was well liked. Split Fiction is another Game of the Year contender. Hazelight Studios isn't a tiny operation, but they made a lean game similar to a AA type of operation with a smaller budget, and they managed to make their game only $50, and it did really well, to the point that they are now rumored to have a movie deal in place. Even the Elder Scrolls Oblivion remastered game was a smaller offshoot studio project, costing only $50 for the consumer, and it was the top seller in the industry in April. These smaller games are putting the cocky big studios in their place. Well, this brings me to the game Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon, the newest AA game to come out of nowhere and really put a dent in the industry, showing us that you don't need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to make a fun video game. Over on Steam, this game, which I had hardly even heard of, by the way, but the game hit over 25,000 players, beating out its AAA competitors from the same genre, Avowed, which couldn't even hit 20,000 players. In fact, what's really hilarious is that according to VG Analytics, Tainted Grail, after 1 weekend of release, is already knocking on the doorstep of outselling Avowed, which has been out for over 3 months.
This is so humiliating!
The success of Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon is a grassroots campaign. It's just gamers telling other gamers that this is a sweet title. And from the footage that I've seen, I concur. It supposedly plays an awful lot like an Elder Scrolls game, and I'm a big fan of those titles. So, not only am I picking this up myself, I felt the need to tell all of you about it. Meanwhile, the few game journalists who have talked about the title are giving it a good score on Metacritic, but most of them are ignoring the game. Game journalists don't like it when their AAA corporate overlords are challenged, but every once in a while, one of these smaller studios comes out of nowhere and clobbers them over the head. Alright, me hearties, make sure that you hit the like button on this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet, and also, don't forget to follow me over on X, where I keep a list of games lousy with wokeness pinned to the account at all times for your reference. My handle on that platform is Dr. Disaster 1. Also, I have started uploading content onto Rumble as well, so make sure that you follow Dr. Disaster on that platform too. But let's have a look at this game, Tainted Grail, and how it has been received over its first weekend. First of all, let's look at the numbers on the game. As I said before, it managed to top over 25,000 players. Not exactly earth-shattering numbers, but for a AA game from a small-time studio, these are actually pretty damn good player count figures. The game managed to crack into the top 10 bestsellers on Steam over the weekend, and that review score is pretty solid, with an 87% positive rate. VG Analytics is the analytics firm that I trust the most when it comes to breaking down the number of copies sold on the Steam platform, and at the time of this recording, they are currently estimating that this game has sold almost 200,000 units on Steam alone, and Avowed, after 3 months, has sold about 287,000. At this rate, Tainted Grail will end up blowing Avowed away. This is funny though, since the budget of Avowed is estimated to be somewhere around $100 million. Tainted Grail, as a AA game, has a likely budget somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 million. This means that once we factor in the amount of money that Steam and the PlayStation Store take as their cut of the sale of the game, Tainted Grail likely only needed around 300,000 copies sold in order to break even on their budget. Even with only a $45 price tag, they have likely managed to break even already when you add in sales from the consoles. This is extraordinary, and it highlights the power of small budget games. AAA CRAP focuses on graphics. They want to wow game journalists and other developers with their technically sound graphic superiority. They want to make sure every individual blade of grass has its own realistic physics. They want to make sure you can see every tiny whisker on the main character's face, but in actuality, gamers don't give a shit about that sort of thing for the most part. Good graphics are great, but there's a reason so many of us keep going back to the retro stuff. Gameplay is king, and AA studios typically focus heavily on gameplay and story, and this is why gamers are turning to these titles. After all, why pay $70 or even $80 these days for a AAA game which won't even be fun when you can drop $50 or so instead and have the time of your life? More of these AAA studios need to remember that the name of the game in gaming is fun. Now, Tainted Grail has certainly had a strong preliminary series of reviews on Metacritic thus far. Gamers gave it an 8 of 10, and game journalists have given it a 77 out of 100. What is incredible to me is how, once again though, the game journalists are largely ignoring this smaller studio game. This is what happens when they aren't invested in a game actually succeeding. You may remember a few months ago, we talked about how only a small fraction of journalists who usually post reviews on Metacritic even gave the first Berserker Kazan a score on Metacritic. They did the same thing with Marvel Rivals back in December, largely ignoring it because they were pissed off that that game had attractive looking characters in it, which offended their feminist sensibilities. They did the same thing with Lollipop Chainsaw Repop, largely ignoring the game. Now they're doing it with Tainted Grail. This game, at the time of this recording, has only 9 reviews on Metacritic, though most games usually end up with around 60 or 70 reviews. And the thing is, there is no way that an outlet like, say, Game Rant wouldn't have access to an early copy of the game to get a review in. And for an outlet that size, they should have plenty of manpower to make sure that a review happens in a timely manner. But since this didn't come from EA or Take-Two or Ubisoft or something like that, and since it isn't a game that overtly pushes their progressive politics, they just don't make it a priority. These people exist to prop up their corporate benefactors. It is in their nature to gatekeep the little guys out. Since the game is seeing some solid results, some of them will eventually feel pressured into playing it and reviewing it, but these aren't people who love gaming. Game journalists are simply people who love accolades, and they're only going to review this game as a means of saving face, not because they want to spread the word about a game that people seem to like. But gamers are making Tainted Grail a mild but solid success nonetheless. As I said, the game supposedly plays an awful lot like Elder Scrolls, but with an Arthurian setting. That sounds badass, and I strongly suggest that you consider giving this one a whirl. But I'm gonna leave it there. What will it take for studios like Obsidian, who made Avowed, what will it take for them to get back on track and focus on good, fun gameplay? How many more times must they be embarrassed by a game like Tainted Grail? Drop your thoughts and your mockery of these AAA failures into the comment section below, and we will talk there. Thanks for watching, me hearties. If you haven't already, your Admiral is inviting you to subscribe to the channel and become a part of the crew. Life as a space pirate may not be glamorous, but there's always plenty of booty.